On the morning of my 25th birthday in 1998, I got a breakup as a gift from my former fiancée. As it so happens, she was having an affair with my brother of all people. It broke my heart. Not only did the woman I was supposed to marry have been unfaithful, but it was my own brother who was sleeping with my fiancée behind my back. I can't possibly describe in words how it felt to be put in that situation. I was a walking mess. But what made things even worse, if that was even possible, it was the fact that my parents had been utterly heartbroken as well. My dad disowned my brother. He told him to never come home and to never speak to him again. Mom couldn't bear to do that, but at the same token, she told my brother it would be a while until she could forgive him for what he did. And that's how I ended up on a road trip. I had to quit my job because my head was about to explode, and I couldn't stay home because everything in the condo reminded me of my former fiancée. So what I did was to sell everything, and I mean everything that I owned at the condo. I also put the condo on the market, and it sold real quick since the real estate market was good at the time and the condo itself was situated in a very much sought after neighborhood. After 2 months, I was a free man with enough money in the savings to last me a couple of years and ready to go on a healing, self-discovery adventure. Once on the road, I was confused as to the purpose of the trip. It didn't feel like it was making me feel any better. Then I arrived at my first destination, which was the Grand Canyon, and suddenly it dawned on me there wasn't some grandiose reason for me being out there. It was about being happy. The road trip was helping me shed all of the pain and suffering that I got from the betrayal. What better reason could there be for a road trip? In any event, I stopped by California, Nevada, and was driving through Oregon, my final destination being Seattle. I was driving on a long stretch of freeway at 2 in the morning, and by then, I had been followed by a van for a couple of hours already. I say I was followed because the van followed me to every stop that I had made. I stopped on 3 separate rest stops, and in every single one of them, I didn't see the driver get out of the vehicle. But back on the road, things had gotten from bad to worse. The driver in the van was now playing games with me. He would step on the gas and close in just enough to line up his vehicle right next to mine. He would continue to keep pace with me just until I turned my head to look at him. Then he would slow down to go behind me again. He repeated the maneuver for about 10 minutes straight. Then it seemed like he got bolder as he began to step on the gas on the same lane that I was driving on, meaning he was playing chicken from behind my car. When the van sped up, I could either hold my ground and let the van veer off, or if I chickened out, then I could change lanes and hope that the van doesn't do the same. Unfortunately, it didn't really matter what I did. Let me explain. If I changed lanes, the van did the same. And when I stood my ground, the van overtook me, but then the driver would brake check me at the front. After that, he would go onto the shoulder, then go behind me again. So unless I was willing to ram the van off the road, all I could do was to practice the ultimate defensive driving. Some 10 minutes thereafter, I saw a sign for a rest stop, and that was a huge relief on my part. But as I came across the next sign with the instruction to take the exit, I couldn't help but be disappointed. It was a small gas station coupled with a small diner next to it. Even so, I got off in hopes that I could perhaps call the cops for help, or maybe the van wouldn't follow me this time. Well, the van did follow me, but I wasn't completely out of luck. There was a police cruiser parked outside of the diner. I parked my car and walked inside the diner in no time. That's where I found a police officer sitting on a stool sipping on a cup of joe after a meal. I walked up to him and told him of everything that had happened. His response was disheartening. This was our conversation, starting with the cop. Did the van ram into your car? No. Did the driver in the van cause an accident? No, but it would have if I didn't make emergency maneuvers. Do you have any proof that the driver in the van drove recklessly, as you say? No, but the cop wouldn't let me finish my sentence, as his final words were. I can't help you then. He didn't break any law, and I'm not gonna question the man without any proof of wrongdoing. Mister, I suggest growing a pair and getting back on the road. He then left the diner, and that was that. I turned around and stared at the van. I was gonna go out and confront the driver, but that's when the waitress stopped me and said, Mister, we're open here around the clock. Why don't you stick around until daybreak and make your departure then? If it helps, the coffee's on the house. That alternative sounded much better. I sat on a stool by the bar and spoke to the waitress for 2 hours until the van left, then waited a few more hours until 7 a.m., and that's when I left the diner to get back on the road. Before leaving the diner, I left a $200 tip for the waitress and the $22 I owed for the hash browns, scrambled eggs, and whatnot. I left a big tip not only for her taking care of me, but also because she refused to charge me for the coffee. She was actually going to put it on her tab. I was not about to make her do that, and so I tipped her big. I arrived in Seattle safely after that. I don't know who was in the van, what the driver wanted from the confrontation, and what would have happened had I actually confronted him or her. I think it's a good thing that I didn't find out. When I look back on that night, I can't help but feel that I might not be here today if not for the kind-hearted waitress. I'm still very thankful for what she did for me. To wrap things up, my brother married my ex-fiancée, but they got divorced a couple of years thereafter when my ex cheated on him with some other guy. My dad still doesn't speak to my brother, even though I told him on many occasions to forgive him. I forgave my brother as soon as I came back from the road trip. But needless to say, we don't have much of a relationship. Today, I'm married to a wonderful woman, but more importantly, a faithful wife. I have 2 girls and a boy, all good kids, much in part thanks to the way they were brought up by their mother. I see the old cheating incident as something that helped me dodge a bullet. I am so lucky that it happened before we got married. I finished college in 2010 and got my first job in the same year. I was living with my sister at the start of 2011, but decided to move out once her boyfriend had moved in for good. My yearly salary was at $32,000 at the time, so it really wasn't much. I remember a studio in a good neighborhood went for $700, but you could also get a 2-bedroom apartment in an okay-ish neighborhood for about $1,000. I wanted to save money, so renting a 2-bedroom and getting a roommate seemed like a smart idea. That's what I did and ended up sharing my apartment with a total stranger, which was a first for me. I don't count college roommates as total strangers since my roommates then were at least from the same school. Sarah, my roommate at the time, was truly a total stranger. Sarah and I got along fine during the first couple of months. We weren't buddies or anything remotely similar, but both of us respected each other's space and basically stayed out of each other's way. That's a perfect roommate if you ask me. Sadly, things began to change for the worse after the initial 2 months. Sarah began coming home late, meaning she'd take long showers long after midnight, even though she knows my bedroom's right next to the bathroom. Some hygiene issues also began to show up. For example, not flushing the toilet, leaving dirty dishes in the sink, and not helping out with general cleaning. It was as though she had become a completely different person. Then one day, it occurred to me that I hadn't seen Sarah's face in a while. I don't mean that she didn't come home, but I literally mean that she didn't show her face. She'd wear hoodies, a baseball cap, and would always walk around with her face looking down. 5 months after being roommates, I finally told her to move out. By note, by the way, because she refused to open her door. I had to shout out the message outside of the door, then slip a note with the details under the door. I should also mention that she was late on 2 months of rent. I was about to go back to my room when Sarah came out and she began crying, asking me for help. That's the first time in 2 months that I had seen her face clearly. Sarah was no longer the young and vigorous 25-year-old woman that I had met only 5 months ago. Without exaggerating even a little, she looked 50. But not only that, she was missing a few of her front teeth and her face was covered with rashes and red bumps that made her look like an irradiated corpse. I don't mean to be heartless, but she looked hideous. You might have guessed it by now, but Sarah was a crack addict. She wasn't one when she first moved in, but had become one after about a month or 2. Think about how scary that is. It took merely 4 months for the drug to transform her into a useless, repugnant, disgusting human being. By the time Sarah had asked for my help, she had already lost her job, she was selling her body for money, and physically, she was never going to recover to the state before the addiction. I spoke to her for hours on to convince her to contact her parents. She did eventually, and her parents did come to get her, but she ran away before they could get to her. I don't know what happened to Sarah after that. I would hope she's doing better, but I hear only about 25% of addicts remain drug-free. In light of the tragedy, my problem seems a bit less important, but I'll still mention that I never got the rent money that Sarah owed me. Her parents told me that it wasn't their responsibility, which I agree since Sarah's an adult, but I honestly thought they'd be a bit more grateful than that. I saw firsthand what drug addiction can do to a person. It is truly frightening to witness in person how it completely destroys an individual inside out. If ever anyone offered you anything similar to crack, then run as far away as you can from that individual and always remember Sarah. Her face aged 25 years in only 4 months. Remember that. I was at a park this one day getting in my daily run. 3 laps later, I was done for the day. Before heading home, I walked toward the nearest bench and sat down to relax a little. Sitting on the bench, I could see children playing in the playground and a bunch of parents keeping an eye on them. Then it occurred to me how much the world had changed in the last half century. I guess I should explain. I'm 60 years old today. I've seen with my own eyes the dramatic changes that we went through over the years. Some good, some bad, but nonetheless, we've changed a whole lot. You see, when I was a kid, children used to play on their own. We were pretty much always unsupervised. But today, no matter where you go, if there are children, there are parents hovering right over them. The concerns of parents is understandable. I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm only pointing out the difference. In any event, it was nice to see children play. It brought back some fond memories of my childhood. You know, it's not every day that you think of your friends from when you were 6 to 10. It's nice sometimes to look back and reminisce. I didn't look at the kids for too long though. Most men will agree, we like to keep our distance from children. The farther the better. That's another cultural thing that's changed over the years. When I was a kid, interactions between adult male and children were not looked at with suspicious eyes. So yeah, I turned my body to the left so I wouldn't be facing the playground, but then to my left there was another bench about 10 yards away and a woman was sitting there. My body automatically turned to the right and thankfully there was no one on that side. A couple of minutes thereafter, right before I was about to leave, I heard some commotion to my left, but I ignored that as it was none of my business. I got up and turned my body to the left, since that's the direction towards home, then saw something insane. I saw a man loading an unconscious woman inside the trunk of his car. Based on the color of the leggings the woman was wearing, and due to the fact that the bench was empty, I was certain the person being loaded was the woman I saw earlier. It took me a second to react, but I ran toward the car to stop the perpetrator. Unfortunately, by the time I had reached the car, the creep was already in the driver's seat and about to drive off. I had just enough time to try to open the rear door, but it was too late as the car sped off then disappeared. I called the cops and told them of everything I know, which wasn't much as I saw the woman for maybe 2 seconds or less. I couldn't really describe to them how she looked. I also couldn't give them the plate number of the car because the perp came ready and had it taped over with duct tape. He probably had it done near the park. This is from a year ago, and as far as I know, the woman is still missing. I often ask myself if I could have saved her had I cared about my fellow man just a little more. Thankfully, terrible things like that happen rarely. But still, if I hadn't feared being looked at as a creep myself, would I have reacted to the commotion instead of ignoring it? I feel that our social cohesion has broken down. In my estimation, there are a set of unwritten rules that we are forced to adhere to from an early age. We're told that's how we blend in with the rest of the world. If you ask me, setting up arbitrary rules based on immutable differences between people makes our society worse. Culture is a difficult thing to decipher, but I think 50 years ago, what happened at the park would have gone down differently. I really do.